The veterinarian's hand trembled as he held the phone, staring through the rain-streaked window at the skeletal figure in the quarantine paddock. "Mrs. Thompson, I need you to bring Sarah down here immediately. What's happening?" "I can't explain it." His voice cracked with an urgency that made experienced rescue workers stop and listen. For 3 days, the blind horse hadn't eaten a single bite, hadn't moved from his corner, hadn't responded to medication, gentle coaxing, or even the presence of other horses. The rescue center had exhausted every option in their playbook. This morning at dawn, they'd made the devastating decision. Euthanasia was scheduled for noon. Then someone on staff remembered a detail buried in his medical records. 10 years ago, a little girl had bottle-fed this same horse when he'd arrived as an abandoned foal, already losing his sight to a genetic condition. She'd whispered promises to him every morning before school, her small hands brushing his golden coat. She'd sworn she'd always be his person, no matter what. But life happened the way it always does. Her family moved 3 states away for her father's job. The girl grew up, went to college, built a new life. The horse was adopted by another family, then another, then another. Eventually, he ended up here, blind, broken, with no fight left in him. Now that little girl was 20 years old, living 3 hours away, completely unaware that the foal she'd loved was dying. The veterinarian had just tracked down her mother's number through old intake paperwork. His request sounded impossible even to his own ears. Just bring her, let her say goodbye. After everything he's been through, he deserves to hear one familiar voice before the end. If you're already feeling your heart tighten and want to know if this horse survives, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. Thousands of people are already following stories like this one, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Sarah hadn't thought about Copper in years. Not really. Sure, occasional memories would surface when she saw horses in fields along the highway, but the sharp grief of leaving him had faded into something distant and manageable. Now, gripping the steering wheel as her mother navigated back roads she didn't recognize, that old ache resurfaced with surprising intensity. "They said he stopped eating 3 days ago," her mom repeated, her voice carefully neutral in that way parents use when they're trying not to make things worse. "The rescue center found our old contact information buried in his medical records. They thought maybe seeing you one last time might give him some peace before—" She didn't finish the sentence. Sarah pressed her forehead against the cool car window, watching bare November trees blur past. She'd only spent 6 months with Copper before the move, and she'd been 10 years old. Surely he wouldn't remember her after a decade. Animals didn't hold on to memories that long, especially blind ones who'd passed through multiple homes, multiple owners, multiple abandonments. The rescue center materialized through the morning fog, like something from a dream, a converted red barn surrounded by muddy paddocks, white fencing that had seen better years. Sarah's stomach twisted into knots. She wasn't ready to see him like this, dying. So different from the playful foal who'd followed her voice around the pasture, who'd nuzzled her pockets for hidden peppermints. Dr. Martinez met them at the entrance, his weather-worn face unreadable behind professional composure. "Before you see him, I need to tell you something strange that happened this morning." He pulled them aside, away from other staff members. "I was reviewing his file and mentioned your name out loud. Sarah, just once, not even directed at him." His voice dropped to something between wonder and disbelief. The horse's ears moved. For the first time in 72 hours, he reacted to something. In this world. The smell hit Sarah first, a complex mixture of hay, antiseptic, livestock, and something else she couldn't quite name. Sadness, maybe. The particular heaviness that clings to places where animals wait for endings they can't understand. Her sneakers squeaked against the concrete floor as Dr. Martinez led them deeper into the facility. They passed the main barn where a dozen horses watched from their stalls with curious, intelligent eyes. Some nickered softly. Others barely lifted their heads from hay nets, too absorbed in their own recovery to care about visitors. "Copper's in the quarantine area," Dr. Martinez explained, his keys jangling as he unlocked a second door. "We isolated him when he stopped responding to treatment. Didn't want to stress the other horses with his condition." Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together against her chest. Through the observation window of the quarantine room, she could see him. All the air left her lungs in a single, painful rush. He looked nothing like her memories. The coat that had gleamed like a new penny in sunset light had faded to dull, tarnished bronze, stretched tight over a skeleton of protruding ribs and jutting hip bones. His head hung so low, his muzzle nearly touched the ground, as if the weight of it had become too much to bear. Those eyes, once bright with mischief and trust despite the creeping blindness, were now completely clouded over, white as cataracts, staring at absolutely nothing. How long has he been like this? Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper, and she had to clear her throat and try again. How long? Dr. Martinez opened his tablet, pulling up the intake photos with reluctance. The family who surrendered him 2 weeks ago said he'd been declining for months. They couldn't afford specialized care for a blind horse anymore. He swiped through images that made Sarah's heart crack further with each one. When he arrived, he was severely dehydrated, malnourished, covered in pressure sores from lying down too much. We've treated the infections, addressed the malnutrition, done everything medically possible. But he won't eat, her mother said quietly, stating the obvious problem that underlay everything else. He won't do anything. Dr. Martinez set down the tablet, and for a moment his professional mask slipped, revealing genuine sorrow. It's like he's given up. We see it sometimes in animals who've been through sequential traumas. They just stop fighting. The body's still alive, but the will to survive is gone. Sarah pressed her hand against the cold glass, leaving a handprint in the condensation. A memory surfaced with painful clarity. Copper as a foal, how he'd press his impossibly soft nose against her palm, how his ears would swivel toward her footsteps, even before his failing eyes could find her approaching figure. He'd known her by sound, by scent, by some indefinable connection that transcended his disability. What happened to his eyes? She whispered, though part of her didn't want to know. When I knew him, he could still see shadows and shapes. He could see light. Progressive genetic condition. According to the records, he's been completely blind for about 5 years now. Dr. Martinez gestured to the medical chart on his screen. The first family who adopted him after you tried their best, but a blind horse requires very specialized care, specific facilities, extra time. He kept getting passed along to new homes, until eventually no one wanted to take on the challenge anymore. Until no one wanted him at all, Sarah finished, her throat so tight she could barely force the words out. Hot tears blurred her vision, and she didn't bother wiping them away. Dr. Martinez handed Sarah a paper surgical mask and a pair of disposable gloves. Standard quarantine protocol, he explained, but his words sounded distant, filtered through the rushing sound in Sarah's ears. Her entire focus had narrowed to the door separating her from Copper, just 6 inches of metal, and a handle she was terrified to turn. There's something else you should understand before you go in. The veterinarian's tone shifted, becoming more careful. When I said your name this morning, Sarah, his ears moved toward the sound. But then I said it again 2 minutes later and nothing happened. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, that I was seeing patterns where none existed, because I wanted there to be hope. Sarah's mother touched her shoulder with gentle pressure. Honey, you need to prepare yourself. Don't get your hopes up too high. He's very, very sick. We're here to say goodbye and give him some peace. That's all we can do. The unspoken message was clear. Don't expect miracles. Don't break your heart expecting recognition that won't come. But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. She was remembering the summer she'd turned 10, right before everything changed. The rescue center, a different one back in their old town, had called asking if anyone could foster a newborn foal whose mother had rejected him within hours of birth. He was already showing signs of progressive blindness from a genetic condition. No one else wanted to take on a disabled baby horse with an uncertain future. Her parents had said yes, thinking it would be temporary, just a few weeks until they found a permanent home for him. Sarah had taken one look at his copper-colored coat, catching the late afternoon sunlight, and named him on the spot. She'd never asked permission, just declared it as fact. Every single morning before school, she'd sit cross-legged in his stall for exactly 23 minutes. That's how long she had from breakfast until the bus arrived at the end of their long driveway. She talked to him about everything and nothing. Her fears about starting middle school in the fall, her best friend Emma who'd moved to California, her grandfather who'd just died from cancer, and how much it hurt that no one would explain why. Copper would rest his chin on her shoulder, his warm breath tickling her neck, his body pressed against hers for comfort and security. Even as his vision deteriorated week by week, he always knew exactly where she was in any space. Her voice had become his compass, his anchor point in an increasingly dark world. "I sang to him," Sarah said suddenly, the memory crystallizing with perfect clarity. "There was this lullaby my grandmother used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. I'd hum it every single morning while brushing his coat. He'd close his eyes and do this thing with his lips like he was trying to hum along." Dr. Martinez opened the quarantine room door, and the reality of what she was about to face hit her like a physical force. Well, if anything in this world is going to reach him now, it would be that. But his expression remained kind and pitying, the look of someone who'd seen too many hopeful families face inevitable loss. He clearly didn't believe a simple song could bridge a decade of separation and suffering. The room was smaller than it had looked through the observation window, creating an intimacy that felt both comforting and suffocating. Copper stood in the far corner, his body angled away from the door, head down, completely still. He didn't react to their entrance, didn't lift his head at the sound of footsteps, didn't even flick an ear toward the voices. Sarah took 3 steps inside and stopped abruptly, suddenly paralyzed by a terror she hadn't anticipated. What if he didn't remember? What if she was just another stranger to him now, another disappointment in a long line of people who'd entered his life and then vanished? What if she'd built this moment up in her head during the 3-hour drive, only to face the devastating truth that she'd been forgotten? If this part has already touched your heart, leave a like on the video. It really helps the channel grow and shows YouTube that more people need to hear stories like this one. "Take all the time you need," Dr. Martinez whispered, already backing toward the door with practiced sensitivity. "I'll be right outside in the observation area if you need anything at all." Then he was gone, and the soft click of the door closing behind him sounded impossibly final. Sarah stood frozen with her mother silent against the wall, giving her space, but staying close enough to catch her if she fell apart. The afternoon light filtered through the high window, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny, indifferent witnesses. Copper's breathing was labored, each exhale a visible effort that made his skeletal ribcage expand and contract. Sarah could literally count every rib, could see the dull patches where his beautiful coat had rubbed away from lying down too much. This magnificent animal, this creature who'd once galloped in circles around her just for the joy of hearing her laugh, had been reduced to a skeleton, waiting for permission to stop fighting. Every instinct screamed at her to run to him, to throw her arms around his neck like she'd done 1,000 times as a child. But something held her back, fear maybe, or the crushing weight of all the years that stood between 10-year-old Sarah and the woman she'd become. "Hey, buddy," she tried, her voice barely above a whisper, fragile as glass. "It's me. It's Sarah." The words felt inadequate, too small for the moment. Nothing, not even the slightest flicker of recognition. His clouded eyes continued staring at nothing, unfocused and empty, looking through the world rather than at it. Sarah's mother made a soft, sympathetic sound in the back of her throat. The message was unmistakable. "Don't torture yourself. He doesn't know you anymore. Too much time has passed. Too much pain has buried whatever memories might have existed." But Sarah forced herself to take another step closer, then another. She was 5 feet away now, close enough to see the scars crisscrossing his legs, the grey hairs that had appeared around his muzzle, the way his hooves needed trimming, close enough to smell the medicated shampoo they'd used and the antibiotics they'd been trying unsuccessfully to get him to take. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and the words cracked something open inside her chest. "I'm so sorry I left you. I didn't want to go. I begged them to let me stay, or to take you with us, but they said it was impossible. You'd already been adopted by another family. I thought you'd be happy. I thought you'd forget me and have a wonderful life." Her voice broke completely, I thought leaving would be better than staying and making it harder." Still nothing. Copper stood like a statue carved from stone, beyond the reach of words or touch or desperate apologies. Sarah turned away, unable to watch anymore, ready to tell Dr. Martinez that this had been a mistake, that coming here had only reopened old wounds without providing any closure for either of them. Then she remembered the lullaby, her grandmother's voice singing it during thunderstorms when Sarah was small and frightened, her own voice humming it to a frightened foal who couldn't understand why the world was slowly going dark around him, why the light was fading day by day. She'd made him a promise, hadn't she? That last morning before the moving truck arrived, she'd wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered that she'd always be his person, even if she couldn't be, there physically, even if life took her far away. Sarah started humming, quietly at first, almost to herself, the melody uncertain after so many years. But then the notes found their rhythm, her grandmother's lullaby, the one about golden fields and endless summer days where nothing bad could ever happen. The one she'd hummed every single morning for 6 months, 10 years ago. For several long seconds, nothing changed. Copper remained absolutely motionless, his head still hanging low, his body radiating exhaustion and defeat. Sarah felt foolish, childish. What had she been thinking? That a simple song could bridge a decade of abandonment and pain? But then, so subtle she almost missed it, one ear rotated, just slightly, just enough, toward her voice. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She kept humming, louder now, more confident, letting the melody fill the small room. The song bounced off concrete walls and seemed to wrap around them both like something physical, something real. Copper's other ear moved. Both were now angled precisely, in her direction, swiveling and adjusting to catch every note. His nostrils flared wide, taking in her scent with sudden intensity, processing, searching through years of memories and trauma and disappointment for something familiar, something worth holding on to. "That's it," Sarah whispered between verses, her voice thick with emotion. "It's me. You're Sarah. I came back. I finally came back." His head lifted, just an inch at first, then 2, then more. Those clouded eyes couldn't see her, would never see her again, but his entire body was suddenly alert in a way it hadn't been in days. A tremor ran through his legs like electricity, his muscles, atrophied as they were, tensed with effort. Sarah's mother gasped audibly from her corner, one hand flying to cover her mouth. "Oh my God, Sarah." Sarah kept humming, moving closer now with slow, careful steps. 3 feet away, 2 feet, close enough to extend her hand, palm up, the way she'd done countless times before. She held it near his, muzzle without touching, letting him investigate at his own pace, giving him control. Copper's nose twitched, nostrils working overtime. He inhaled deeply, taking in her scent with an intensity that seemed almost desperate. Then something extraordinary happened. A sound emerged from deep in his chest, not quite a whinny, not quite a groan, something wordless and raw and full of recognition that seemed to come from his very soul. "I know," Sarah sobbed, finally closing the distance between them. Her hand touched his neck, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath paper-thin skin. "I know, baby, I know I'm here. I'm so sorry it took so long. I'm so sorry." Copper's entire body leaned into her touch with sudden, desperate force. After 3 days of refusing any contact, of standing rigid and unreachable and waiting to die, he pressed against her like he had as a foal. His head found her shoulder, that exact same position he'd always loved, and he exhaled. A long, shuddering breath that seemed to release years of waiting, years of wondering why she never came back. Behind them, the door burst open. Dr. Martinez had been watching through the observation window, and his professional composure had completely shattered. He stood frozen in the doorway, his phone already out and recording, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This isn't medically possible," he breathed. "I need to document this. No one's going to believe me." But Sarah wasn't thinking about documentation or medical impossibilities, or anything beyond this moment. She was running her hands over Copper's face, relearning every beloved contour. The small scar above his left eye, she'd been there when he got that. bumping into a fence post while learning to navigate his blindness, the whirl of hair on his forehead that spiraled counterclockwise, the soft spot behind his ears where he'd always loved to be scratched. "You remember," she kept whispering like a prayer. "You actually remember me. After everything, after all this time, you remember." Copper made that sound again, half whinny, half groan, wholly heartbreaking. His lips searched for her pockets with sudden purpose, the way he used to every single morning, looking for the peppermint candies she'd always sneaked him, despite her parents' rules about treats before breakfast. The familiar gesture made her laugh and cry simultaneously, a sound that was half joy, half devastation. "I don't have any treats, buddy. I didn't know I'd see you today. I didn't think—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the complexity of emotions flooding through her system. "Sarah," her mother said gently, stepping closer with tears streaming down her own face. "Ask him what we can do. Ask Dr. Martinez what happens now." The veterinarian was already pulling up Copper's chart on his tablet, his entire demeanor transformed from resigned sadness to focused determination. His fingers flew across the screen, pulling up test results and treatment protocols. "If he's got a reason to fight now, if he's got his person back, we can try more aggressive treatment approaches. The infections are entirely treatable with the right antibiotics. The malnutrition is reversible with proper nutrition and time. We thought we were dealing with an animal who'd given up, but this changes absolutely everything." "What does he need?" Sarah asked immediately, her voice steady with sudden resolve. "Tell me exactly what he needs." "Time, consistent care, someone who can manage his blindness long-term and give him the specialized attention and patience he requires." Dr. Martinez looked up from his tablet, his expression serious but hopeful. Most importantly, he needs someone who won't give up on him again, someone he trusts completely, someone worth fighting for. Sarah didn't hesitate for even a second. "I'll do it, whatever it takes. I have my own apartment now, and I looked up boarding. Facilities on the drive here. There are 3 within 20 minutes of my place. I'll visit every single day if I have to. I'll take extra shifts at work. I'll figure it out." "Sarah, honey," her mother interrupted gently, placing a hand on her arm. "That's a huge commitment. You're still in college full-time, you work part-time at the bookstore, you have your whole life ahead of you. A blind horse requires hours of care every single day." "I don't care." Sarah's voice was pure steel, unshakable. She looked her mother directly in the eyes. "I left him once because I was a child and didn't have a choice. I'm not a child anymore. I'm not leaving him again. I'm not doing that to him twice." Copper's head pressed harder against her shoulder, as if he understood every word being spoken, as if he was casting his own vote about whether to keep fighting or let go. His weight against her was substantial, grounding, real. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly, a smile finally breaking through, his professional mask. "Okay, all right. Let's start with the immediate needs. Right now, today, this minute, we need to get food into him. He hasn't eaten in 72 hours, and his body is starting to shut down from malnutrition. Now I want to hear from you. Comment below. Do you believe animals never forget those who help them? I'd love to read your answer, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now to follow more emotional stories. There's one coming next week about a rescue dog that will absolutely break your heart in the best way possible. 3 hours later, Copper was eating hay from Sarah's hand. Small amounts, carefully monitored, but eating. She stayed until the rescue center officially closed at sunset, humming that lullaby until her voice grew hoarse and her throat ached. Before she left, she pressed her forehead against his and made a new promise, one she had the power to keep this time. She'd be back tomorrow morning, and the day after that, and every single day after that, until he was strong enough to come home. 10 years had passed since a little girl and a blind foal had found each other in a world that hadn't wanted either of them very much. Life had pulled them apart, carried them down different paths through loss and growth and change. But some bonds don't break with distance or time. Some promises, even the ones whispered to animals who can't understand human words, carry a weight that spans decades. Copper had spent 3 days ready to die, standing in a corner waiting for permission to stop fighting. Then he heard a voice he'd held onto through years of abandonment and pain and confusion, and he decided to live. Because sometimes all any of us need, human or animal, is to know that someone somewhere hasn't forgotten us, that we mattered enough to be remembered, that love, real love, doesn't have an expiration date.